A night at Ilana's. Ilana's was the kind of restaurant that epitomized wealth and exclusivity. Nestled in the heart of the city, its golden exterior gleamed under soft lights that seemed to whisper promises of indulgence. The glass doors opened to reveal a world where every detail was designed to impress, from the intricately carved wood paneling to the subtle scent of jasmine that wafted through the air. Ilana's wasn't just a restaurant. It was an experience, a place where the city's elite came to flaunt their status and revel in their affluence. Maya adjusted the bow of her crisp black uniform and inhaled deeply as she prepared for the evening shift. Her reflection in the polished mirror stared back at her, young, determined, yet weary. She had grown up in a modest neighborhood just a few miles from this opulent haven, a world so far removed from the one she now served. For Maya, Ilana's represented a stark contradiction, a place of dreams, but not hers. She didn't aspire to lavish wealth or sparkling jewels. Her dream was simpler, a quaint cafe where people felt welcomed, a space to share warmth and connection. Tonight was special, or so the rumors among the staff suggested. A prominent socialite, Annalise Devereaux, was hosting her daughter's extravagant birthday party. The Devereaux' name carried weight in the city. Their wealth was old money, steeped in tradition, and their influence stretched across every corner of the social landscape. The guest list, a veritable who's who of society, had everyone on edge. Maya could feel the tension in the air as she joined her colleagues in the dining area, each of them striving for perfection under the watchful eyes of management. As Maya glided across the marble floors, the restaurant buzzed with life. Waiters in black tie moved with calculated precision, balancing silver trays with glasses of vintage wines and intricately plated hors d'oeuvres. The hum of conversation blended seamlessly with the soft strains of a live piano performance, creating an atmosphere of refined elegance. Maya's first table was a small group of businessmen deep in conversation, their laughter low and deliberate. She noted their sharp suits and the glint of expensive watches peeking from their cuffs as she filled their glasses with sparkling water. "Thank you," one of them muttered absent-mindedly, barely glancing up. Maya smiled politely and moved on, her attention shifting to the next table. It was then that she noticed her. Annalise Devereaux sat at a corner table that seemed to command the room. She was dressed in a floor-length gown that shimmered like liquid silver under the dim lighting, adorned with diamonds that sparkled with every movement. Her posture was regal, her expression one of practiced indifference. Around her sat a circle of equally well-dressed companions, their laughter lilting but hollow, like wind chimes with no breeze to carry their tune. Maya had served the wealthy before, but there was something about Annalise that unnerved her. Her gaze was piercing, as if she could see through pretenses and dismiss them in the same breath. When Annalise's eyes landed on Maya, the corners of her mouth lifted in a faint smile, one that held no warmth. It was the kind of smile that could unnerve even the most seasoned server. "Waitress," Annalise called, her voice cutting through the ambient hum of the room. It wasn't a request, it was a command. Maya approached the table, her steps measured and her expression calm. "Yes, Mom. How may I assist you?" Maya asked, her tone polite but steady. Annalise gestured to her plate with an exaggerated flick of her wrist. "This salad is unacceptable," she said, her tone dripping with disdain. "It's wilted. I don't eat subpar food." Maya glanced at the plate, noting the pristine arrangement of fresh greens and edible flowers. It was evident that the chef had taken great care in its preparation. Still, Maya nodded. "I'm very sorry about that, ma'am. I'll have the kitchen prepare a fresh one right away." Annalise leaned back in her chair, her eyes narrowing. "Good. And please, try to expedite it. My time is valuable." As Maya turned to leave, she heard Annalise mutter to her companions, "Standards really have dropped. It's like they'll hire anyone these days." The laughter that followed was sharp, each note landing like a barb in Maya's chest. She pushed through the kitchen doors, the warmth of the bustling space enveloping her like a protective shield. Mark, the head chef, glanced up from his station. "Another complaint?" he asked, his gruff voice tinged with sympathy. "Salad," Maya replied, keeping her tone light despite the tightness in her chest. "Apparently, it's not good enough." Mark snorted. "Nothing's ever good enough for some people. Don't let it get to you, kid." Maya nodded, appreciating his words even if they did little to ease the sting of Annalise's remark. She returned to the dining area with a fresh plate, setting it before Annalise with practiced grace. "Here you are, ma'am. I hope this meets your expectations." Annalise didn't respond immediately. She picked up her fork and speared a piece of lettuce, inspecting it as though it might reveal some hidden flaw. Finally, she took a bite and set the fork down. "Better," she said curtly, as though bestowing a great favor. Maya inclined her head and stepped back, retreating to the safety of the bar. From her vantage point, she caught sight of a man seated alone at a small table near the back. He was older, his features marked with lines that spoke of wisdom rather than age. His suit was understated but impeccably tailored, and his presence exuded a quiet confidence that was at odds with the ostentation surrounding him. The man's gaze met Maya's briefly, and he offered her a small, knowing smile. It wasn't the kind of smile that demanded anything. It was one of acknowledgement, of recognition. Maya felt an odd sense of comfort under his gaze, as though he understood something about her struggle that words couldn't express. She returned to her duties, the weight of the night pressing heavily on her shoulders. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that the man in the corner wasn't just another diner. There was something about him, something that felt important in a way she couldn't quite define. As the evening wore on, Annalise's demands continued. Each one was sharper than the last, designed to remind Maya of her supposed place. Yet, through it all, Maya remained composed, her professionalism unshaken. Little did she know, the man in the corner was watching closely, his quiet observation setting the stage for a revelation that would soon change everything. The observer in the shadows. The next evening at Ilana's unfolded with a sense of foreboding for Maya. The prior night's encounter with Annalise Devereaux was fresh in her mind. The humiliation, the condescension, it clung to her like a shadow she couldn't shake. But despite her apprehension, she stood tall as she crossed the threshold into Ilana's, her polished shoes clicking against the marble floor. Tonight, she resolved, would be different. Somehow, she would rise above it. The dining room was abuzz with activity as the first wave of patrons arrived. The chandeliers overhead cast a golden glow, illuminating the sea of designer gowns and tailored suits. Maya adjusted her uniform and busied herself preparing her station, hoping the evening would pass without incident. As the crowd grew, her attention was drawn once more to the quiet man from the previous night. He entered the restaurant with the same understated grace, dressed in a dark suit that was both simple and elegant. His presence seemed to command respect, though he did nothing to demand it. Unlike most of the patrons who wore their wealth like armor, he exuded a quiet confidence that was almost magnetic. Maya watched as he chose a table near the corner, the same as before, and settled into his seat with a journal in hand. He wrote something down, his movements deliberate and thoughtful, as though each word carried significant weight. There was an air of mystery about him, one that made Maya's curiosity simmer. She noted his presence but turned her focus back to her tables, knowing better than to let her mind wander during a busy shift. The quiet man wasn't the only familiar face in the room that evening. Annalise Devereaux arrived fashionably late, her entrance as deliberate as her sharp remarks. This time, she was adorned in an emerald green dress that shimmered as she moved, her hair swept into an elegant updo. Diamonds glittered at her ears and around her neck, catching the light like tiny stars. Maya swallowed hard as Annalise scanned the room, her sharp gaze landing squarely on her. Annalise's expression twisted into a faint smirk, one that sent a chill down Maya's spine. It was a look that promised more of the same torment as the night before. Maya squared her shoulders and approached the table with the calm professionalism she had cultivated over years of practice. "Good evening, ma'am," Maya greeted with a measured tone. "Welcome back to Ilana's. May I start you off with something to drink?" Annalise tilted her head, as though inspecting Maya like one might assess an object for flaws. "Ah, you again," she said with a tone of mock surprise. "They kept you on." Bold choice. Maya felt the sting of the comment but refused to let it show. "Yes, ma'am," she replied evenly. "I'll be serving you tonight. What would you like to start with?" Annalise's lips curled into a smug smile. "I'll have the Chardonnay. And this time, make sure it's properly chilled. Last night's effort was disappointing." "Of course, ma'am," Maya replied, her voice steady despite the tightness in her chest. As she turned to retrieve the wine, she felt the weight of Annalise's gaze on her back. The other diners were blissfully unaware of the tension between the two women, their conversations and laughter filling the room. Maya moved with practiced efficiency, pouring the Chardonnay into a gleaming glass and ensuring it was as cold as possible. She returned to Annalise's table, carefully placing the glass before her. "Here you are, ma'am," Maya said with a polite nod. Annalise picked up the glass, inspecting it with exaggerated scrutiny. She murmured, taking the sip. "Acceptable." Maya suppressed a sigh of relief and began to step back when Annalise leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping just enough to be private but still cutting. "You know," she said, her tone dripping with condescension, "people like you should really learn their place. You'll never rise above this, no matter how hard you try." Maya's heart sank, the words landing like blows. But before she could respond, a deep, calm voice cut through the moment. "Excuse me, miss," the voice said, firm yet gentle. Maya turned to see the quiet man standing just a few feet away. His expression was unreadable, but his gaze was fixed on Annalise. The room seemed to hold its breath as his presence filled the space. Annalise looked up, startled. Her smug demeanor faltered, replaced by confusion and a hint of discomfort. "Yes?" she asked, her tone less sharp than usual. The man offered a polite smile, though there was an edge of steel in his eyes. "I couldn't help but notice how you were speaking to this young lady," he said, his voice steady and measured. "I hope you understand that the staff here work tirelessly to provide excellent service. They deserve respect, not ridicule." Annalise's cheeks flushed, her mouth opening and closing as she struggled to form a response. The quiet man didn't wait for one. Instead, he turned to Maya, his expression softening. "You've handled yourself with remarkable grace," he said to her, his tone sincere. "Thank you for your service tonight." Maya felt her cheeks warm at the unexpected compliment. "Thank you, sir," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. The quiet man nodded and returned to his table, leaving Annalise to stew in the silence that followed. The patrons around them had taken notice of the exchange, their murmurs filling the air. Annalise's confidence seemed to shrink under their gazes, her arrogance now tempered by embarrassment. Maya retreated to the bar, her heart pounding. She glanced toward the quiet man's table, her eyes meeting his once more. He gave her a small nod, one that carried more meaning than any words could convey. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Annalise's demands became fewer, her tone less cutting. Maya felt an odd sense of vindication, a quiet strength that bolstered her through the night. When the last of the diners had left and the restaurant was quiet again, Maya found herself thinking of the man in the corner. Who was he? Why had he spoken up for her? There was something about him that felt significant, as though their paths had crossed for a reason. As she wiped down the tables and prepared to leave, Maya resolved to find out. What she didn't yet realize was that this man, with his quiet authority and thoughtful gaze, was about to change her life in ways she could never have imagined. A seed of change. The events of the previous night played on a loop in Maya's mind as she prepared for her next shift at Alana's. The quiet man's intervention, Annalise's sudden discomfort, and the ripple of whispers that had spread across the restaurant. It had been unlike anything she had ever experienced. For the first time, Maya felt as though she wasn't entirely invisible, as though her presence and efforts had truly mattered to someone. Her thoughts returned to the quiet man. His words were simple, Yet they had carried immense weight. Who was he? And why had he stepped in for her when he could have easily remained an observer, as so many others did? As she stepped into Ilana's, the usual buzz of pre-shift activity greeted her. Waiters rushed to polish glasses, chefs barked orders from the kitchen, and the manager paced the floor, reminding everyone of the importance of maintaining the restaurant's impeccable reputation. Yet, amidst the chaos, Maya felt a strange calm. She wasn't sure if it was the quiet man's words lingering in her mind, or the subtle shift in how her coworkers now looked at her, with a glimmer of respect she wasn't accustomed to. Tonight, the restaurant was booked solid. The reservations list read like a roll call of the city's elite, and the staff knew they were in for a demanding evening. Maya took her place, smoothing her apron as she mentally prepared for another night of seamless service. The first 2 hours passed without incident. Maya moved fluidly from table to table, her actions precise and practiced. She delivered plates of delicate, artfully arranged dishes and poured glasses of wine with a steady hand. She had just finished serving a group of corporate executives when she saw him, the quiet man, enter the restaurant. This time, he wasn't alone. 2 younger men and a woman accompanied him, each dressed sharply and exuding an air of quiet confidence similar to his. They walked in step with him, their presence understated yet commanding. The group moved to the same corner table where the man had sat on previous nights. As he settled into his seat, his eyes briefly scanned the room, landing on Maya. He offered her a small nod of acknowledgement that sent a flicker of warmth through her. The table was assigned to another server, but Maya couldn't help but steal glances as she worked. The quiet man and his companion spoke in low voices, their conversation punctuated by occasional laughter. There was an ease about them, a camaraderie that felt genuine in a way that was rare in the world of Ilana's. As the night progressed, Maya noticed a shift in the atmosphere. Annalise Deveroux had arrived, as she often did, making her grand entrance in a deep sapphire gown that seemed to glimmer with every step. Her entourage followed closely behind, their presence demanding attention. Annalise scanned the room with her sharp eyes, her gaze lingering on Maya for a moment before moving on. Maya braced herself, anticipating another night of cutting remarks and veiled insults, but something felt different. There was an unease in Annalise's demeanor, a subtle hesitation in her movements that hadn't been there before. When Annalise finally sat at her table, she barely glanced at Maya as she placed her order. Her tone, though still clipped, lacked its usual venom. Maya was both relieved and curious. Was it the lingering effect of the quiet man's words? Or was there something else at play? The answer came later that evening. Toward the end of the night, as the restaurant began to quiet, Maya found herself behind the bar polishing glasses. She glanced over at the quiet man's table and noticed that he was no longer seated there. His companions remained, engaged in animated conversation, but he was nowhere to be seen. A moment later, she felt a presence beside her. Turning, she saw him standing there, his calm expression softened by a faint smile. "Good evening," he said, his voice low and warm. "Good evening, sir," Maya replied, her heart beating a little faster. "I hope I'm not disturbing you," he said, his tone polite but direct. "I wanted to speak with you before the night ended." Maya blinked, unsure of what to say. "Of course, sir. Is there something I can assist you with?" The man tilted his head slightly, studying her with those piercing eyes that seemed to see far more than they let on. "You've handled yourself with remarkable poise," he said after a moment. "Not just tonight, but every time I've been here. That's not something one learns from training alone. It speaks to character." Maya felt her cheeks warm under his praise. "Thank you, sir. That means a lot." He nodded, as though her response confirmed something he already knew. "I've been watching you, Maya," he continued, his tone thoughtful. "Not in a way that should alarm you," he added quickly, a hint of humor in his voice, "but because I see potential in you, potential that deserves recognition." Maya's breath caught. "You see potential in me?" "Yes," he said simply. You carry yourself with a quiet strength that many overlook. But I don't. People often fail to see the value in others because they're too busy looking for status or spectacle. I don't make that mistake." She was stunned, unable to find the words to respond. "I don't mean to keep you from your work," he said, sensing her hesitation. "But I wanted to offer you something. A chance to step into the next chapter of your life." "What do you mean?" Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. He placed it on the bar between them. "My name is Thomas Holden," he said. "I'm the founder of Ilanas, though I suspect you may have already guessed that." Maya's eyes widened. She had heard whispers about the elusive owner, but she had never imagined he was the quiet man who had been sitting at the corner table for the past few nights. "I don't just own restaurants," Thomas continued. "I mentor people, those who show promise, those who work hard but lack the opportunities they deserve. If you're interested, I'd like to offer you a position in my mentorship program." Maya stared at the card, her mind racing. She felt a strange mix of disbelief, excitement, and trepidation. I don't know what to say." "Take your time," Thomas said with a gentle smile. "Think it over. The offer stands whenever you're ready." With that, he gave her a final nod and walked away, leaving Maya alone with her thoughts and the small card that now represented the possibility of a very different future. As the night ended and Maya walked home, under the glow of the streetlights, she couldn't help but feel a spark of hope ignite within her. Thomas Holden's words replayed in her mind, their weight sinking in with each step. He saw potential in her, a potential she had struggled to see in herself for so long. For the first time in years, Maya allowed herself to dream a little bigger. Little did she know, this was only the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything she thought she knew about herself and the world around her. A door opens. The days following Thomas Holden's offer were a whirlwind of emotion for Maya. The small, pristine business card he had left behind sat on her modest kitchen table, its elegant font spelling out an opportunity she could barely fathom. She would stare at it during breakfast, run her fingers over the embossed letters during her quiet evenings, and even tuck it into her apron pocket during her shifts at Ilanas. The card felt heavier than it looked, as though it carried the weight of an entirely new life. Maya's first instinct was to dismiss the offer. The very idea of being mentored by someone like Thomas Holden seemed surreal. Men like him didn't pluck servers from obscurity and guide them toward success. Yet there was no denying the sincerity in his eyes or the calm conviction in his voice when he had spoken to her. "You have potential," he'd said. The words echoed in her mind, growing louder with each passing day. What did he see in her that she couldn't? On the third evening after their conversation, Maya found herself at a small cafe not far from her apartment. It was her favorite spot, a humble, family-owned place with mismatched chairs and the aroma of fresh coffee lingering in the air. This cafe had been her sanctuary for years and the inspiration for her dream of owning her own space. She often came here to sketch ideas in her notebook, designs for menus, floor plans, even potential names for her future business. Tonight, though, she couldn't focus. The notebook lay open in front of her, untouched. Her mind was consumed by thoughts of Thomas Holden and the possibilities his offer presented. Finally, she pulled out the card and placed it on the table beside her notebook. "What are you waiting for?" she whispered to herself. Before she could lose her nerve, she picked up her phone and dialed the number on the card. Her fingers trembled as she pressed the buttons, and her heart raced as the line connected. "Holden Enterprises," a cheerful voice answered. "How may I assist you?" Maya hesitated. "Hi, my name is Maya. Mr. Holden gave me his card and suggested I call. I'm not sure." "Ah, Ms. Maya." The voice interrupted, warm and welcoming. "Yes, Mr. Holden mentioned you might be reaching out. One moment, please." Maya barely had time to process her shock before the line clicked, and a deep, familiar voice greeted her. "Maya," Thomas said. "I'm glad you called." "Hi, Mr. Holden," she replied, her voice wavering. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all," he said. "I've been hoping to hear from you. Have you given my offer any thought?" "I have," Maya said, pausing to steady her voice. "I'm interested, but I have so many questions. Why me? What does the program entail?" "I'm just a server," he interrupted gently. "Maya, I chose you because I see qualities in you that remind me of myself when I was younger. You're resilient, hardworking, and you don't let difficult circumstances define you. Those are the qualities of someone who can create something extraordinary." His words hit her like a wave, leaving her momentarily speechless. "As for the program," he continued, "it's a mentorship designed to help individuals like you achieve their goals. You mentioned your dream of opening a cafe. I want to help you get there." Maya felt tears prick her eyes. For years, she had carried her dream quietly, nurturing it in secret because it seemed so unattainable. Hearing someone like Thomas Holden acknowledge it, believe in it, was overwhelming. "What would I need to do?" she asked finally. "There's no catch, if that's what you're worried about," he replied with a chuckle. "We'll start with a meeting where we can discuss your goals in detail. From there, I'll provide guidance, resources, and opportunities to help you build a foundation for your cafe. All I ask is that you commit to the process and bring the same dedication you've shown at Ilana's." Maya nodded, even though he couldn't see her. "I can do that." "Good," he said. "Let's meet tomorrow morning at my office. My assistant will send you the details." The next morning, Maya stood in front of a gleaming skyscraper in the heart of the city, clutching her bag tightly. The building was imposing, its mirrored windows reflecting the bustling streets below. Taking a deep breath, she stepped inside, her shoes clicking against the polished marble floors as she approached the reception desk. The receptionist greeted her warmly and directed her to the 27th floor. Maya's nerves grew with each passing second in the elevator, but she reminded herself of Thomas's words, "You have potential." When the elevator doors opened, Maya stepped into an office that was equal parts elegant and welcoming. The space was filled with natural light, and the walls were adorned with photographs of restaurants, community projects, and handwritten letters of gratitude. It was a reflection of a man who had built his empire not just on ambition, but on connection. Thomas greeted her personally, his warm smile putting her at ease. He led her to a small conference room where they sat across from each other. A notebook and pen lay before him, ready to capture her thoughts. "Tell me about your dream," he said simply. Maya hesitated for only a moment before she began. She told him about her love for her neighborhood, her vision of creating a space where people could gather, and her desire to serve simple, heartfelt food that brought people together. As she spoke, Thomas listened intently, occasionally jotting down notes but never interrupting. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Your vision is clear, and your passion is evident," he said. "Now we need to map out how to make it a reality." The hours that followed were a crash course in planning and strategy. Thomas guided Maya through the basics of creating a business plan, budgeting, and securing funding. He shared stories of his own journey, the failures and triumphs that had shaped him. Maya absorbed every word, her mind racing with possibilities. By the time their meeting ended, Maya felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. Thomas handed her a folder filled with resources and assignments to complete before their next session. "This is just the beginning," he said. "The road ahead won't be easy, but I believe you have what it takes." Maya left the office with a newfound sense of purpose. For the first time, her dream felt tangible, within reach. As she stepped out onto the busy street, the world around her seemed brighter, more alive. The door had opened, and she was ready to step through it. Little did she know, the journey ahead would not only challenge her but transform her in ways she couldn't yet imagine. And Thomas Holden would prove to be more than just a mentor. He would become the catalyst for a new chapter of her life. The weight of expectations. Maya's journey toward her dream began in earnest the day she walked out of Thomas Holden's office. The folder he'd given her became her lifeline, its contents a roadmap to a world she had never dared to explore. Inside were pages filled with guidance, budgeting worksheets, sample business plans, marketing strategies, and notes scrawled in Thomas's precise handwriting. For a woman who had spent most of her adult life serving others, these materials felt like keys to a locked door she had long assumed was inaccessible. But the weight of her new responsibilities quickly became apparent. The first challenge was carving out time. Maya still worked full shifts at Ilana's, often coming home well past midnight. Her feet ached, her body screamed for rest, but her mind raced with ideas and questions. After a brief nap, she would wake before dawn, her tiny apartment glowing faintly with early morning light, and immerse herself in research and planning. Coffee became her constant companion, fueling long hours spent poring over spreadsheets and drafting potential business names in her notebook. Despite the exhaustion, Maya felt a renewed sense of purpose. For the first time in years, she wasn't just working to survive. She was working toward something. Yet, with this newfound determination came a gnawing sense of doubt. Was she truly capable of building a business from the ground up? Could she navigate the complexities of permits, financing, and marketing? Every step forward seemed to reveal new challenges she hadn't anticipated. One of those challenges arrived in the form of her first task from Thomas, to present a detailed vision of her cafe, including its name, target audience, menu concept, and initial budget. It sounded simple enough, but as Maya sat at her small kitchen table, staring at the blank document on her laptop, she felt paralyzed. Every idea she had seemed too ambitious, too vague, or too far-fetched. The pressure to impress Thomas, to justify the faith he had placed in her, was overwhelming. That night, after another long shift at Ilana's, Maya found herself walking through the quiet streets of her neighborhood. The air was crisp, the faint scent of jasmine wafting from a nearby garden. She passed the small bakery where she had often bought pastries as a child, the corner store where the owner greeted every customer by name, and the park where she had once dreamed of holding outdoor events for her future cafe. Each familiar sight reminded her of why she was doing this, not for prestige or wealth, but to create a space that would bring people together. Inspired, she returned home and opened her notebook. The ideas began to flow. She imagined a cozy, welcoming space with mismatched furniture and shelves lined with books and plants. The menu would feature simple yet delicious dishes inspired by the flavors of her childhood: savory hand pies, aromatic teas, and warm, gooey cookies. She wanted the cafe to feel like an extension of her community, a place where people from all walks of life could gather, connect, and feel at home. When she finally submitted her proposal to Thomas, she felt both nervous and exhilarated. His response came the next day in the form of an email. It was brief but encouraging. "This is an excellent start, Maya. Let's discuss it further during our next meeting." The following week, Maya found herself back in Thomas's office, seated across from him as he reviewed her proposal. His expression was thoughtful, his eyes scanning each page with meticulous care. Finally, he looked up and smiled. "You've captured something special here," he said. "Your vision is clear, and your passion shines through. Now we need to refine it and make it actionable." The hours that followed were a deep dive into strategy. Thomas showed Maya how to break her vision into manageable steps, focusing first on securing funding. He explained the importance of crafting a compelling pitch to present to potential investors or lenders, and guided her through creating a detailed financial plan. Maya absorbed every word, her pen flying across her notebook as she took notes. But as the meeting progressed, she couldn't ignore the growing tension in her chest. While Thomas made everything sound achievable, the sheer scope of what lay ahead felt daunting. The numbers, the logistics, the endless details, it was so far removed from the world she knew. Sensing her unease, Thomas paused. "Maya," he said gently, "what's on your mind?" She hesitated, unsure how to articulate the knot of fear and doubt inside her. "It's just, everything seems so big, she admitted finally. "I'm afraid I'll mess it up, that I'll disappoint you, or myself." Thomas leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Do you know how many times I failed before I opened my first restaurant?" he asked. Maya shook her head. 14, he said, smiling faintly. 14 failed ventures, each one teaching me lessons I couldn't have learned otherwise. Fear of failure is natural, but don't let it paralyze you. Every mistake is an opportunity to grow. What matters is that you keep moving forward. His words resonated deeply, easing some of the tension in her chest. "I'll try," she said quietly. Thomas nodded. "That's all I ask." As Maya left the office that day, she felt a renewed sense of determination. Yes, the road ahead was daunting, but she wasn't alone. Thomas's mentorship was a lifeline, and her dream was worth every challenge she would face. Over the weeks that followed, she threw herself into the work, meeting with Thomas regularly to refine her plans, practice her pitch, and research potential locations for her cafe. But not everything went smoothly. One particularly difficult evening, after a grueling shift at Ilana's, Maya returned home to find an email from Thomas with feedback on her latest draft. His comments were constructive but critical, pointing out areas where her budgeting needed improvement and urging her to think more realistically about her timeline. The email stung, not because it was unfair, but because it reminded her of how much she still had to learn. Frustrated and exhausted, Maya nearly closed her laptop without responding. But then she remembered Thomas's words. Every mistake is an opportunity to grow. Taking a deep breath, she reopened the document and began addressing his feedback, determined to improve. The next morning, she sent him a revised draft. His reply came within hours. "Much better. You're learning quickly. Keep it up." Maya smiled, her frustration from the night before melting away. Each step forward, no matter how small, brought her closer to her dream. One evening, as she sat in her favorite cafe, working on the latest iteration of her business plan, Maya glanced around the room. She saw a young couple sharing a plate of cookies, an older man reading a newspaper by the window, and a group of friends laughing over steaming cups of tea. This was the kind of space she wanted to create, a place filled with warmth, connection, and life. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine what it would feel like to unlock the doors of her own cafe for the first time, to see her vision come to life. The thought filled her with a sense of hope she hadn't felt in years. She still had a long way to go, but Maya was no longer afraid of the journey. With Thomas's guidance and her own unwavering determination, she knew she could turn her dream into reality. And deep down, she understood that the challenges she faced now were shaping her into the person she needed to become, a person capable of building something extraordinary. The weight of expectations, once overwhelming, now felt like a force propelling her forward. Maya wasn't just working toward a dream. She was becoming the kind of person who could achieve it, and that realization was more powerful than anything she had imagined. The grand unveiling. The day had finally come. Maya stood in front of a modest storefront nestled on the edge of her neighborhood, her heart pounding as she stared up at the freshly painted sign that read, "The Hearth Cafe." It was simple and elegant, just as she had envisioned. A warm golden hue framed the entrance, and through the large windows, she could see the space she had poured her soul into over the past year. The journey to this moment had been anything but easy. Maya thought back to the countless sleepless nights, the mountain of challenges she had faced, and the unrelenting self-doubt she had battled. There had been moments when she'd wanted to give up, when the obstacles seemed insurmountable. But through it all, two things had kept her going: the unwavering support of Thomas Holden and her belief in the dream she had nurtured for so long. Thomas had been more than a mentor. He had been her anchor. From helping her refine her pitch to secure funding, to advising her on everything from choosing the perfect location to designing the menu, he had guided her every step of the way. But he had also challenged her, pushing her to think critically and take ownership of every decision. "It's your dream, Maya," he had told her during one of their final meetings. "No one can build it for you. You have to believe in it, as much as you want others to. Now, as she stood before her cafe, the weight of those words settled over her like a comforting embrace. She had believed, and now her dream was real. The interior of the Hearth Cafe was a reflection of everything Maya had envisioned. Mismatched chairs and tables gave the space a cozy, lived-in feel. Shelves filled with books and potted plants lined the walls, while soft lighting cast a warm glow over the room. The menu, displayed on a chalkboard above the counter, featured a carefully curated selection of dishes and drinks inspired by her childhood favorites: savory hand pies, spiced teas, and gooey cookies that smelled like home. Maya walked through the space, making final adjustments as she prepared for the cafe's grand opening. Her small team of employees, all of whom she had hired from her neighborhood, bustled around her, their excitement palpable. They had worked tirelessly to help her bring this vision to life, and their enthusiasm reminded her of why she had started this journey in the first place: to create a place where people felt seen, welcomed, and valued. By the time the doors opened, a small crowd had gathered outside. Maya's heart swelled as she recognized familiar faces among them: neighbors, former coworkers, and even a few regulars from Milana's. Their smiles and warm greetings filled her with a sense of belonging she hadn't felt in years. As the first customers entered, Maya greeted each one personally, thanking them for coming and ensuring they felt at home. The cafe quickly filled with laughter and conversation, the clinking of coffee cups and the rustle of pages from books. It was exactly as she had imagined, a space alive with connection and warmth. Amid the flurry of activity, a familiar figure appeared in the doorway. Thomas Holden stood there, dressed in his usual understated style, his expression a mix of pride and quiet satisfaction. Maya's breath caught as their eyes met, and she crossed the room to greet him. "You made it," she said, her voice tinged with emotion. "Of course," he replied with a smile. "I wouldn't miss this for the world." Thomas glanced around the cafe, his sharp eyes taking in every detail. "It's perfect," he said after a moment. "You've created something truly special here, Maya." "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I couldn't have done it without you." He shook his head. "No, Maya. This was you. I only gave you the tools. You're the one who built it." His words hit her with a profound sense of gratitude and pride. For so long, she had doubted her ability to achieve something like this, but now, standing in the middle of her dream come to life, she finally believed in herself. As the evening wore on, the cafe continued to buzz with energy. Friends and strangers alike shared stories over steaming cups of tea and plates of food. Maya moved through the room, soaking in the joy and connection that filled the air. This was exactly what she had dreamed of, a place where people could come together and feel at home. Toward the end of the night, as the crowd began to thin, Maya found a quiet moment to sit at one of the tables. She looked around the cafe, her heart full as she watched the last few customers linger, reluctant to leave the warm, inviting space she had created. Thomas joined her, a cup of tea in hand. "How does it feel?" he asked. Maya smiled, her eyes glistening. "It feels like everything I hoped it would be." He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "And what's next?" The question caught her off guard. "Next," she repeated. "Yes," he said. "You've built something incredible here, but dreams don't stop growing. What's the next chapter for you?" Maya considered his words, a spark of excitement flickering within her. She hadn't thought beyond this moment, but now that the cafe was a reality, the possibilities felt endless. Perhaps she could expand, opening more locations in other neighborhoods that needed spaces like the Hearth Cafe. Or maybe she could start a program to mentor aspiring entrepreneurs, just as Thomas had mentored her. "I don't know yet," she admitted, "but I'm ready to find out." Thomas smiled. "Good. Just remember, the only limits are the ones you set for yourself." Maya nodded, her resolve solidifying. She had overcome so much to get here, and she knew she had the strength to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the last customer left and the cafe grew quiet, Maya turned off the lights and locked the doors. She stood outside for a moment, staring at the sign above the entrance. The Hearth Cafe. It wasn't just a name. It was a symbol of everything she had worked for, everything she believed in. With a deep breath, she turned and walked into the night, her heart light and her spirit full. This was just the beginning of a journey that would continue to unfold in ways she couldn't yet imagine. But for the first time, she felt ready to embrace it all, challenges, triumphs, and everything in between. Her dream had become a reality, and she knew that the best was yet to come. The first test. The days following the grand opening of the Hearth Cafe were a whirlwind of activity. Word of the cafe spread quickly, fueled by both Maya's personal connections in the neighborhood and the warm atmosphere that seemed to embrace every customer who walked through the door. Reviews began to trickle in on social media, in local blogs, and even through word of mouth, and most were glowing. Customers praised the thoughtful design, the comforting menu, and Maya's personal touch. But as the initial excitement settled, the reality of running a business began to sink in. Maya found herself facing a barrage of challenges, each more daunting than the last. Managing inventory, maintaining consistent quality, and navigating the complexities of payroll were just the beginning. The honeymoon phase of owning her dream cafe faded as she grappled with the sheer volume of responsibilities. One particularly difficult morning, Maya arrived at the cafe to find her kitchen staff in disarray. The supplier for their signature tea blend had failed to deliver, and they were out of the cookies that had quickly become a customer favorite. To make matters worse, one of her servers had called in sick, leaving the team short-handed. Maya's stomach churned as she tried to piece together a solution. The cafe was fully booked for the day, and the thought of disappointing her customers filled her with dread. She rolled up her sleeves and dove into the kitchen, working alongside her team to improvise new menu items and ensure every order was filled. By the time the last customer left that evening, her body ached and her mind felt like a tangled web of stress and exhaustion. As she locked the doors and slumped into a chair, the weight of the day pressed down on her. For the first time since opening the cafe, she wondered if she was truly cut out for this. Her phone buzzed on the table, and she saw a message from Thomas. "How was your day? Remember, even the best days come with challenges. Call me if you need to talk." Maya stared at the screen for a moment, then sighed and dialed his number. Thomas answered on the first ring. "Rough day?" he asked, his tone understanding. "You could say that," Maya replied, her voice heavy with fatigue. She recounted the day's chaos, her frustration spilling out in a torrent of words. Thomas listened patiently, his silence encouraging her to let it all out. When she finally finished, he spoke with a calm that steadied her fraying nerves. "Maya, what you're experiencing is normal," he said. "Every business has its tough days, especially in the beginning. The key is not to let those moments define you. Focus on what you can learn from them." "I know," Maya said, though her voice betrayed her doubt. "But it feels like there's so much to handle. What if I'm not good enough?" "You are good enough," Thomas said firmly. "You've already proven that by building this cafe from nothing. It's not about being perfect. It's about showing up every day and doing your best. And when things go wrong, which they will, you adapt and keep going." Maya closed her eyes, letting his words sink in. She knew he was right, but the weight of her responsibility still felt overwhelming. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I don't think I could do this without you." "You're not alone, Maya," he replied. "And you're stronger than you realize. Remember, even on the hardest days, you're making progress." After hanging up, Maya sat in silence for a while, reflecting on his words. She thought back to the countless times she had doubted herself during her journey to this point, only to push through and come out stronger. Maybe this was just another test, a reminder that resilience wasn't about never struggling, but about continuing to move forward despite the struggle. The following morning, Maya arrived at the cafe with a renewed sense of determination. She had spent the night brainstorming solutions to the challenges she faced, and she was ready to tackle them head-on. She met with her staff before opening, addressing the issues from the day before and outlining a plan to prevent them from happening again. She also reached out to new suppliers to ensure they would have a backup source for key ingredients. Over the next few weeks, Maya learned to navigate the ebb and flow of running a business. She discovered that while the challenges never truly disappeared, her ability to handle them grew with each passing day. She also began to lean on her team more, trusting them to take on responsibilities and empowering them to contribute their ideas. One evening, as Maya closed the cafe, she took a moment to reflect on how far she had come. The Hearth Cafe was thriving, not because everything was perfect, but because she had learned to embrace imperfection and adapt. She thought of the customers who had become regulars, the team that had become like family, and the moments of connection that made all the hard work worthwhile. Maya knew she still had much to learn, but she also knew she was capable of learning it. Her dream was no longer just a vision. It was a living, breathing reality. And as she looked toward the future, she felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that her strength, determination, and the support of those who believed in her would carry her through. The Hearth Cafe wasn't just a business. It was a testament to what could be achieved when someone dared to believe in themselves, even in the face of doubt. And as Maya locked the doors and stepped out into the night, she felt a quiet, unshakable confidence that the best was yet to come.